There. Okay. I think now we're actually. Yes. Okay. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni viewer. Every other time you guys have been able to see and hear me, so I'm going to assume that's the case here as well. And here we are. Tonight, I have a special guest with me that even I'm surprised I was able to get, but I think he's got some pretty interesting stuff to say. And as you guys are tuning in, you will be able to hear the one and only Dinosaur Don himself, Don Glut. And I got it right this time, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
I am Glut, to quote somebody. So
yeah, yep, I accidentally mispronounced your name in the Dinosaur Tracks video. I should have asked in advance, but I've corrected it now. And we have at least one person with us. Hello there, Animal Man 57. And Penguin Agents. So people are starting to come in. So, to start off, for those who either don't know who you are for some reason, or who just want to hear you tell them who you are again, please feel free to introduce yourself in your own special way.
Well, I'm Don Glut, and I'm a musician, but I'm also a writer, a director, a producer, and an amateur paleontologist, and a few other things along the side. So that's what I do. But before we go any farther, I want to thank you for the wonderful and very insightful review you gave of our Dinosaur Tracks music some months ago. And I'm really, really grateful for that. I put that on our website, and I thank you, and I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I'm glad you got what we were doing with those songs. A lot of people, they don't really understand. So thank you. So whatever you want to talk about, well, I'm pretty happy.
Well, thank you as well, and you're quite welcome. Let's see. There are plenty of places to start, but you've basically, from what I've gathered, reading and watching other interviews, you've basically been in some form of entertainment and not doing a normal 9-to-5 day job pretty much your whole life, right?
Yeah, I never set out to be a writer. I never set out to be a filmmaker. I set out, my main goal when I was young, when I was a teenager, was not to work in a regular job. And I've been able to do that, all these years. I've had a couple jobs that out of necessity. Once, to buy a movie camera. I was saving up for a movie camera, so I worked long enough. It was a month and a half in Chicago when I was 17 years old to pay for the movie camera, and a 16mm movie camera. And once back when I was in my 20s, I had a girlfriend whose mother couldn't understand that writing was a job. So I took two jobs simultaneously, a bookstore at night and during the day at an advertising agency. The advertising agency job lasted a week, and the bookstore job lasted about, I don't think anything ever went more than a month and a half. And of course, when I was a little kid, I had a paper route, but those are pretty much, little things that I had to get by at a certain period of my life before I really was established as a writer or a director or anything like that.
That's very impressive. A lot of people I know think that you got to be doing the 9-to-5ers in order to do it, and then you just get sort of stuck in there, which makes a lot of people think it's impossible anyway.
Yeah, well, that's the trap you fall in. A lot of people. Now, I grew up in Chicago, and Chicago, the hog butcher for the world. It's a blue collar city pretty much, and people don't think in terms of creative things. The people that do, the people that get it move out of Chicago and they come to California and New York or something. But most of the people that I knew personally, friends or people in my family that had various talents for things, whether it was art or acting or music or writing or whatever it would be, they never understood that those could be their day job. Those are always like hobbies, things you did on the side, and they never really pursued it. So they got into a regular job somewhere, and then they got very comfortable making the weekly money, the weekly, the steady paycheck, and the talent sort of fell by the wayside. Me, I was just so furious. I just loved what I was doing so much. I was having such a good time that I pursued all, and I had various, I had various talents in certain things, and that were easy for me. Writing was easy, artwork was easy, music was easy, acting was easy, and so I just kind of stumbled into these things, and I gave each one my best shot, and eventually, every one of those talents, every one of those hobbies, I don't have any hobbies now because all my hobbies have been turned into businesses. So if you ask me what my hobby is, I don't have any. Maybe just getting out of bed in the morning is a hobby, but people have to realize that writing or acting or music, or if you're an athlete, sports, whatever, those can be your day jobs. And it's like, things you did as a kid, playing, but getting paid for it. And that's a wonderful thing. Most people I know hate their jobs, their regular jobs, and they can't wait until the weekend comes up so they can go home and, go on a picnic or go to the beach or go watch television, whatever they do on the weekend. And my kind of work, I can't wait until it starts. Me, the sad part is when it's over, when you bring an end to a story you've been writing, or you bring an end to a piece of music that you've been recording, or a movie you've been making. That's the sad part. But the fun part is when you begin and you got an idea in your head of what this thing is going to look like or sound like when it's all complete, and then you see it come together one step at a time, and when it's all over, it's done, and you hope it has some kind of a resemblance to what you originally thought, but it's over. And sometimes you meet, you make friends, like you're making a movie, and you got a crew and a cast, and everybody's closely knit during that period, but then it's over, and some of those people you never see again. So it can, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, very much so. But I know exactly what you're talking about. That whole thing of like that excitement of starting it and going through it, and then you spend so much time on it. You finally get to the end where it's done and it's ready to go out, and then it's like, well, now what?
Well, the trick is to have something else in mind. So when you finish something, you move into something else. There's some people I know that only had one movie in their mind or one song that they thought of. They never thought of doing another one, But I like to keep the wheels going, and like Ed Norton used to keep the wheels are always turning, and always have another project in the, down the road somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, I try to do that as well. Just sometimes I need to decompress after it, but not too long though. We have a few other people who have just come in. So Nordic Nugs Music Reviews is happy to be here. Enzaru says, greetings to both of us. Just customary to acknowledge people, How's it going? Well, it's going well with me, and
so far so good. But it's not over yet.
Love to know your favorite dinosaurs.
Well, when I was a little kid, people would ask me that, and of course, being a boy and not a little girl who liked all those wimpy plant eaters, it was always Tyrannosaurus Rex. But now, now that I've really gotten into the science, they're all pretty much as interesting. I mean, they're all my favorites. It's the group as a whole are my favorite. Yeah,
and you were telling me before the broadcast you're doing actual paleontological stuff, that you've got.
I've written a lot of books on dinosaurs, and I worked as a consultant, on movies and television shows and things. But currently, one day a week, I'm a volunteer fossil preparator in the Dino Lab at the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County, and I prepare fossils. So I work on dinosaurs. We have a new dinosaur exhibit, a huge sauropod. They had to build an extra wing on the museum to house it, but it hasn't been formally named yet. the nickname is Natalie, was spelled the G-N-A-T, because when they were excavating it, there were a lot of gnats that were getting in the way. So they're calling it Natalie, but I worked on that a little bit. But I'm working right, and now I don't know, it's a titanosaur from Utah. I don't know what the name of it is. I don't know if anybody, I didn't know there were titanosaurs in Utah, to be honest with you. But I've been working on a slab of matrix, and just last week I finally uncovered enough matrix to reveal some ossified tendons, or tendons that have become bone, and that's very exciting. You know, it's exciting knowing when you're working on something like that, you got to block a stone about that big, and you're working on it with all kinds of, you know, dental tools and things, that when you uncover the actual fossil that's under all that rock, that your eyes are the first eyes to see that in, like, you know, 150 million years or more. You know, and that's kind of a rush for me.
Yeah, that must be some, like, an almost ethereal experience, I guess, in a way.
Oh yeah.
Just, yeah. I wanted to be a paleontologist when I was much younger. Then I figured out entertainment, acting, writing. Although there's still a part of me.
Not a whole lot of money in paleontology.
Yeah, there's still a part of me that would like to be involved somehow. So who knows? Apparently, it is possible.
Yeah, where are you located? What state? What?
Oh, I'm way on the other end of the country from you. I'm out in Maine.
Oh, okay.
Yep. We don't have dinosaurs. We have lobster.
I don't know if there's any. I mean, almost every state now has natural history museums, but you might want to check out if Maine does, and if it does, you know, get on the volunteer program and work on fossils like I do. When I think of Maine, I think of dark shadows. You
know? Of course, yeah. And I'm a Collins to boot, so
yeah.
So yeah. I will have to look up if there are natural history museums nearby. To my surprise, there aren't very many aquariums. You'd think a coastal state would have more of those, but
yeah, I grew up in Chicago. We had a great aquarium there called the Shed Aquarium, and that was, I mean, it's a huge aquarium. It's almost the size of the Field Museum, and I loved going there when I lived there.
Nice. Huge fan of Land of the Lost, and that's one of the many things you've worked on.
Yeah, I wrote one episode of Land of the Lost for the second season, where their budget was limited, so I didn't get. They said no new animation for this because we don't have the money. And when I saw the episode finally, they nicely did an original scene that kind of opened the episode of the Tyrannosaurus and the Triceratops growling at each other. They weren't allowed to do actual fights on the show because of the network censorship. So they could growl and look angry and all that. But at least I got one original stop motion shot in there. I was happy.
Nice. And we should, of course, clarify that was the original Land of the Lost, not the reboot from like the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
I can understand the negativity about Chicago, but it's still a really nice city.
But I'm glad, you know, I've become friends with Kathy Coleman and I can't think of his name. Wesley Uri. And that's kind of nice. I ran into them at a convention, and we've been friends ever since. And we did a panel together at one of them.
Cool. Just going through a couple other comments going through here. Two of my favorite authors. Fantastic. Let's see what else we got. Curious viewer grew up loving 1950s sci-fi movies. We've got people with good taste in the audience, as you can see. Machine Dragon Nero reporting in. Glad to have you. I think I've read some of Mr. Glut's books as a kid. Well, I think we've all experienced your stuff as kids, whether we knew it or not.
Well, some of them, I actually wrote some kids' books, you know, for various companies. I've written in Oh, I counted them up once. It was like around 80 or close to 80 that have actually been published, and none were self-published. They've all been published by real publishers.
Hmm.
But every once in a while, I would get a call from a publisher that did children's books, and then and they're doing a new book on dinosaurs or something. So I've done a bunch of those too.
Nice. Here we have Daniel Dimano looking for his copy of the new Dinosaur Dictionary. That's one of those paleontology books you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, and embarrassingly out of date. So don't rely on much of anything you read in there.
Nearly every dinosaur book feels like it's out of date by the time it's published these days.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Mr. Dom,
I did a series of dinosaur encyclopedias that went up to 8 volumes, and because of the lag time at a publisher, and this is some of this was in the days before all this stuff was on the internet, or no, just as things were, the information was coming up on the internet, you would send the manuscript off, and the next day a new dinosaur would be discovered, or an old one would be revised, and 6 months later the book would come out, and it was already out of date. And it's one of the reasons I stopped writing those.
Yeah, but hey, they're interesting windows into what was, and preserves the lineage of the history. Here's an interesting question from the chat. What are your thoughts on cryptozoology and drawing inspiration from them for stories and other things?
Well, I don't put much stock in cryptozoology. Most of it, I think, is just nonsense. But they have been springboards for various stories I've written, about dinosaurs surviving and Bigfoot and all that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. So they're good sources of inspiration then. Yeah, I find it the same way. I put a little more stock in it because I have seen things that I think would be hard to hoax, but what they are, I don't know. Maybe there's a normal explanation, or maybe there's something else. I find that the world tends to be far more stranger than we give it credit for.
Well, cryptozoology is important to some people because they need mystery in their lives. And there's not a whole lot of mystery. A couple hundred years ago, or in thousands of years ago, fire was a mystery, and going from day to night was a mystery. But nowadays, that's been taken away from us because we know so much. And so it's nice to have a mystery, I think, now.
Yeah. Let's see. Since you're from Chicago, I wonder what your thoughts are on the Field Museum and what it was like going in your childhood.
Well, I love the Field Museum. I was a volunteer there until my mom passed away, and I stopped going to Chicago for visits anymore. But I was a volunteer there, and the Field Museum, in some ways, there were a lot of people say, "Well, how did you get interested in prehistoric things?" And I have a complicated answer because there were so many things that originally around the same time sparked my interest. Certain comic books, certain movies I saw, But anyway, my mother took me to the Field Museum, and we went upstairs to where they had all the fossil exhibits and things. And there was one case I went up to, a glass case, and behind it was a skeleton, which I later learned was a prehistoric ground sloth called the Scelidotherium. And the bones were brown, and they were still embedded in the matrix. So you look at the skull, and in the eye socket, there was all this matrix, this rock. And I said, "Mom, why is that skeleton have all that rock in it? What is that?" And she said, "Well, that was so old, it turned to stone, that animal." And I never forgot that. And that was another thing that really heavily influenced me. But I've seen that museum grow. I've seen some of those, what was originally called an apatosaurus skeleton, then it became a brontosaurus skeleton, then it became an apatosaurus. That was originally exhibited, only half of it. They only had the ribs and the hindquarters and about 1/3 of the tail. They didn't have the rest of the tail or the forelimbs or the neck or the skull or anything. And that was like that for years. And then in 1958, they found, I don't know if it was the same parts of the same individual, but they found enough of at least another individual where they could mount the whole thing. So I've seen that. I've seen that go through name. Right now, it doesn't really officially have a name. So we're back to that again. But I've seen a lot of those skeletons change the way they're mounted, their posture, their names. It's been fat. I love that museum. I love it in so many different, not just for the prehistoric things, but for the mummies. One of the greatest mummies collections in the world. And when I was making a mummy movie, I needed a name for my mummy, and I happened to be in Chicago at the time. So I went to the museum, and I went to with a little pad of paper and a pen, and I copied some names down from the exhibits, and I took half a name from one and half a name from another, and I got I think it was a three-part name from three different mummies. I put them together and made one name out of it. So it's been very beneficial, and they've always really been good to me too. The photography department have always let me use photos from their archives and things. And I have personal friends who work up there, so it's like a home away from home for me.
Yeah, I still need to get there myself. Like I've been to Chicago a couple of times for G-Fest. I haven't made it to the museum yet. That's definitely on my list. I've been to the Boston Museum where they have the giant T-Rex statue.
Yeah, I've actually seen the museum's name change over the years. I mean, when I started going there, my mother called it the Field Museum. Then when I started going there, it was called the Chicago Natural History Museum. And then it became the Field Museum of Natural History. And now I believe it's just the Field Museum with a capital T.
I'm sure they'll figure it out one day. Let's see, here's a question. Something I always wondered with Jurassic Park, in real life, if dinosaurs still lived, would they eat humans or would we be non-edible to them?
Well, it was a big carnivore like a Tyrannosaurus or an Albertosaurus or a Giganotosaurus, if you were alive, you would make a nice meal. They would like it.
Yeah, wouldn't be as difficult for them. We're bite size.
Yeah.
Let's see. Mr. Glut, would it be appropriate to call you a living legend of sorts?
A living legend of sorts. Well, I don't. I feel kind of funny when people call me that. I mean, it's nice to be living. Most legends aren't, so I guess it is okay to be called a living legend.
I would certainly, after reading through your bio and everything, I would certainly say you're a Renaissance man because you've done so much and you know so much. And every time I think he couldn't possibly be involved in everything, here's another thing. Just the music, the paleontology, everything.
Well, I'm interested in a lot of things. And I'm always interested in learning something new. Right now, and I'm still not really good at it, but I'm learning ASL, American Sign Language, just because I run into people at conventions and things who are deaf, and I got to go to a translator to communicate with them. I said, well, their translator's like a young girl at 12 years old. If she can learn this, why can't I? So I decided to learn that, and it takes up some free time I have. So I'm learning that, and I like learning bits and pieces of different languages, and I like learning how to do magic tricks. I tried ventriloquism for a while. I mean, stunt work. I mean, I've done a lot of things. I'm interested in a lot of things, and when I'm interested in something, I go for it, and I try to learn as much as I can about it, or if I can learn how to do it, if it's some kind of an activity.
So we can also say you are definitely an autodidact.
A what guy?
Autodidact, someone who teaches themselves, learns everything.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see. I know there are some other. Let's see. What are your thoughts on modern science fiction dinosaur-related stories?
Well, I haven't really read any thing. I read all the old classics. The Ray Bradbury stories and all that. Nothing really current. My only new exposure would be, if you want to count it, the movies. The Jurassic Park movies and things like that. And I enjoy those, and there's a lot of speculation, a lot of misinformation, but for the most part, they're a lot more accurate than, say, something like the Beast of Hollow Mountain, Lost Continent, and some of those old days, that we all cherish so much.
Yeah,
Unknown Island is a real guilty pleasure of mine.
Unknown Island. That is actually the one with the giant ground sloths that look suspiciously like King Kong.
Ray Crash Corrigan with a revamped gorilla suit.
Yep. I actually just rewatched that one a couple weeks ago. So it's actually not bad as far as a movie that was clearly trying to ride King Kong's coattails.
With me personally, I mean, I can appreciate that the Jurassic Park movies, for instance, are, way, way, way above anything like that. But I can watch Unknown Island over and over and over again, where I can't watch the Jurassic Park movies over and over.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's only one Jurassic Park movie everybody agrees is good. The rest, up and down. Although there haven't really been that many other dinosaur movies recently. There was 65 that was like Planet of the Dinosaurs Redux, but hardly anyone saw that. They just announced Primitive War, which is going to be, I think, dinosaurs in the Vietnam War. So, although who knows how that's going to turn out.
Yeah.
And I mean, we also still have Godzilla movies going. So, Godzilla X Kong, Godzilla -1.
Well, my favorite Vietnam movie is The Losers, where it opens with the truck pulling up in the jungle and then the Hells Angels ride out on motorcycles, led by my old friend William Smith. Great, made the best biker movies.
Wonder if I've seen that one. I don't know if I have. I'll have to add that to my list. Let's see. Another comment here. I try to write my dinosaur content to both entertain and educate. Got inspired by Omni to finally publish and grew up reading Glut's books, so major thanks to both of you for all of that.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm glad
you're quite welcome. Let's see. Thoughts on the Land of the Lost reboot series in the 90s and movie adaptation?
I like the original better. Of course, the remakes were technically better, but they seem to be made with a certain amount of cynicism. I mean, they weren't. The originals were a classic, and you loved the characters and everything. And I didn't have that same experience with the remakes.
Yeah. Just scanning, seeing what else. Why am I leaning in when I can just use these? Let's see. Looks like we do have one Star Wars one. Do you want to?
No, I want to say what from Star Wars. By the way, do you know the Land of the Lost radio show in the 1940s, I think it was? But it had nothing to do with dinosaurs or anything. It was a series where somebody would lose something precious, and then I think they would go try to find it. It was a kid's show.
Go figure. Just wanted to tell Don that I still have that Frankenstein in the Lost World magazine he autographed for me at G-Fest in 03 or 04 when I was a kid. I remember reading it a lot. That's from Robert Montserrat.
Well, all those stories, all those Frankenstein stories, plus one brand new one, making it 12 instead of 11, were a few years ago reprinted in book form from a company called Pulp 2.0 Press. And all the embarrassing typos that the editor didn't correct first time around, which is probably the one you read, were corrected. So I strongly encourage you, if you don't want to embarrass me, my books with all those typos, get the books. They're just better. And you can get them online. They're on Amazon. Just the New Adventures of Frankenstein series, that's what it's called.
Yeah. I recently did order one of those volumes. Here's one. Anubis asks, what was it like to work with Michael Nesmith?
That period of my life was one of the best, happiest periods and creative periods of my life. Mike was, first of all, a really good, talented musician. And I think he was a little embarrassed being one of the monkeys. He came out from Texas as a serious musician, and then he got this gig where he was suddenly making a lot of money as one of the monkeys on the television show. So he wanted to prove to everybody that, hey, I'm still Mike Nesmith. I'm not the character you see on television every week. So that's when he put our band together, the Penny Arcade, in which I played bass guitar and a little bit of keyboards, and mostly bass guitar. And he was a funny guy. He had a really incredible sense of humor. And we went to the museum together. I remember the whole family, his wife, Phyllis, and Christian, his little boy, and I, and my cousin who was out from Chicago, Rosemary. We all went to the Natural History Museum. I gave them all the grand tour. And when I finished my amateur Spider-Man movie, Mike had lent me the record album I wanted to use. It was an album by Chicago, the rock band Chicago, and there was this big instrumental part to it, and I wanted to use that for the movie. So he let me borrow that, and we had the premiere of my Spider movie at his house, and those were great times. I loved working with Mike. His family was great. Alf was great. Alf was was basically he cared for Christian, and then when Christian had a little brother, Phyllis had a second son named Jonathan. But Alf, before he started working for Mike, was the chauffeur for the Beatles. So I got to ask him a lot of questions about the Beatles and everything. But Mike, I'll tell you one story about Mike. Before he lived in his big house, he lived in a smaller house up in the Hollywood Hills. And he had a sunken living room. You went in the house, and then to get in the living room, you had to walk down a flight of about 4 or 5 steps. Well, up until that night, I had this running gag going on with the members of the Penny Arcade. I would say, well, what are we going to, I don't know if we can, if we get a gig to play on the night of the full moon, I don't know if I can make it. I had this problem. Well, anyway, I never said werewolf, but they got the joke. The night of this night, we were at Mike's house, and I was out on the veranda, and I was out there with 2 guys from the Penny Arcade, and we looked up at the sky, and there was a full moon there, and they looked at me and they said, "All right, what are you going to do now? We're going to see it transform into a werewolf." They didn't know that I was one step ahead of them, and in the trunk of the car that I came in, I had the brand new Don Post Wolfman mask, the $25 one, which was a lot of money back then, and these 2 gloves with claws on them, okay? And our road manager was in on the gag. So I got in the outfit. I said, I got to get out of here. And I came back in the house. Now, I'd forgotten that Mike had this German Shepherd named Frack that was attack trained in Germany to respond to 50 vocal commands. Well, anyway, the whole family's down in the living room, the sunken living room. And I came in, and I go, in this Wolfman outfit. And our road manager, and I was going through my stuntman training around that time too. So I did a flying leap off the top of the stairs onto his shoulders. In midair, I hear this growl, and it's Frack. In midair, he caught me. I won't say where he caught me.
Oh no!
It took a long time for those scars to go away, and that story traveled around, and they got a lot of mileage out of that story, but it was absolutely true. So I had a lot of great times at Mike Nesmith's house and working with him.
I think that made the stream right there. Thank you for sharing that. That was great. I believe it. I believe it. Just as I'm scanning for other things, though, I mean, you did mention you did a Spider-Man fan film. According to every source I've said, it was the first Spider-Man fan film.
That's what they say. I know there was one made around the same time by a guy in New York. I think he shot in Central Park. I got to know him a little bit decades later. Well, not decades, years later. when we were both, I think, on the picket line in a Writers Guild strike.
Oh.
I don't know if his was before mine or after mine. Mine has a reputation of being the first, and it could very well have been. I like to think it was. I actually, with that, that costume was not made for that film. I was going to the World Science Fiction Convention in Cleveland, and they always had, at the World Cons, they had costume contests. And I happened to stop on the way from California to Cleveland to Chicago, and I asked my mother if she could make a Spider-Man costume. I still wasn't sure what color the non-red part was. Was it black or was it blue? It depended on how it was colored in comics. So I wrote to Marvel and asked them, and I got a letter back from Flo Steinberg, who said, "Well, we're not really sure either. It depends how the light's hitting." So we made it blue. And when I stopped in New York during that Cleveland trip. I actually had a meeting with Stan Lee, and I showed him the costume. And I was trying to get the TV rights to Spider-Man. I really, in my naive way, thought I would actually get the rights to make a Spider-Man television final. But anyway, I still hadn't decided to make a Spider-Man movie. And then about a year later, maybe a couple of years later, a friend of mine named Bill Warren, who was pestering me to make one last amateur movie. I said, "No, I made 40 of them. I don't want to make any more. I want to make real movies." He said, "No, you got that costume." And then I stopped to think, not only do I have the costume, I just bought a 1969 brand new red Camaro. I can buy a model kit. There's one of the model kit companies would always put out the new car as a kit.
Mm-hmm.
I could buy a kit of my car, and in the movie, I could blow it up with some gasoline and an M80 firecracker, and it could double for my car. But there was one other thing. Bill Warren, who suggested I make the amateur movie, was working for the city. And because he worked for the city, he had a key, and that key could unlock any fence on city-owned land, which included the gate that led up the hill to the famous Bronson Caverns, where they shot where the Batcave was on a Batman TV show, and hundreds of B westerns and serials and things, Flash Gordon and all this. That meant I could go up and shoot in that cave, and I didn't have to, like usual, walk up with all the equipment. I could drive up there with everything, with the cast and with all the cameras and the tripods and everything. So I did those three things: having the costume, having the key, and having the model kit that matched up my new car. It was time to make a Spider-Man. And I made it. And that was my last amateur movie. But that's how that came to be. I never really started off to make a Spider-Man. And I did win first prize in that costume contest. I found on the internet some photos from that convention, and there was a picture of me as Spider-Man. And I said, there was a caption, "I wonder who this is." They had no idea it was me. So anyway.
Got another question from the chat. What is one sci-fi story, dinosaur or not, you feel is very underrated? Can it be answered by both of you?
My opinion, maybe the three Edgar Rice Burroughs cast-back novels, Land of Time for God, The People of Time for God, and Out of Time's Abyss. I think that's some of Burroughs' finest writing in those three books. He's got interesting ideas on evolution and everything. I enjoyed those.
Yeah, I agree. Anything by Burroughs, I think. I mean, Tarzan gets a lot of attention, but his other stuff, I think, deserves more attention as well. Pellucidar, John Carter. He also did what else? Like Moon Maiden, I think was him, or was that Howard? Either way, I think one I'm surprised I don't see more people talking about in terms of movies would be The Land Unknown, because I think people just see the T-Rex costume and they think, "Oh, that's a bad T-Rex costume." But again, I recently rewatched it. even with the campiness of the costume, the guy's doing some interesting stuff performing with it.
It's a pretty elaborate, pretty expensive looking movie for what it is, you know.
Yeah.
That set, that whole jungle set must have been enormous, you know. And, you know, they went to some, I mean, there are a couple lizards in there too, but you got the Elasmosaurus in the water. That was all mechanical and everything. And you had the pterodactyl flying overhead in the Tyrannosaurus suit. I enjoyed it, you know.
Yeah. I think it deserves more attention. It kind of gets swept under the rug a lot of times. I also think more people need to read the Dinotopia books. The James Gurney's Dinotopia, you know? Like,
I wrote one of those. I mean, I wrote one.
Yeah, you wrote one of the spin-off novels, Chopper, I believe, right?
That was a tough book to write because those swords are they're real PC. They're real politically correct. You know, nobody drinks milk or eats eggs. And I remember in one of them they were trying to explain the wooden houses people lived in, and they weren't allowed to cut trees down, so these trees all fell down in a windstorm or something crazy like that. But when I wrote it, I got all kinds of notes of things that were no-nos. I had a carnivorous a kid finds an egg and it hatches and he raises it and it turns out to be this big Giganotosaur. It's a huge carnivorous dinosaur. And all the stories were being reviewed by a paleontologist at the Smithsonian Institution, who was a friend of mine. And when I wrote the first draft of the story, they said, "Oh, you can't have this dinosaur eat meat. They all have to be vegetarians, you know." They didn't say they were PC swords, but that's what they were. And so I said, "Okay, for the sake of the story, let's make them PC. Let's make them a vegetarian." That went to my friend, the paleontologist. He said, "Oh no, if this dinosaur ate nothing but vegetation, it would die." Well, that's probably something else that was a no-no in those stories. So we had to figure out, we had to come to some kind of a compromise. And what the compromise was it was okay for him to go in the swamp and eat things like slugs and snails, things that, in their opinion, were not sentient animals. You know, the animals. Oh, and I had a kid being in like a wagon, not a covered wagon, but just like an open wagon. And he was being pulled along by a ceratopsian, a horned dinosaur. That hit the head. Everybody got outraged over that. You can't have a dinosaur subservient to a human being. The dinosaur has to willingly pull the cart. So I had to figure out some way of getting around. But eventually we settled on the story. But in some ways, that was one of the most difficult stories I ever wrote because I had to follow all these crazy rules. You don't know. See, they don't tell you about all the grief us writers have to go through sometimes.
Yeah. It strikes me as weird because, like, the first Dinotopia story did establish that there were meat eaters. They just lived off on their own. And, like, they offered them meat to pass through.
But they didn't tell you what. There was another problem, too. I mean, Jim Gurney's a good friend of mine. I'm not putting Jim down, but there was really no conflict. And you really need conflict in the story, you know. It's like everybody just got along and had art exhibits and parades and concerts. That's all they did. And I would be. That's why when they did the television series, they brought in villains from the outside world that created the conflict. You know, thieves and whatever.
Yeah, they saved in the books. I think they saved the conflict for the second one.
Yeah,
but. You know, either way, what else have we got here? Here's an interesting one. Why is dinosaur media so scarce? Jurassic Park clearly has the monopoly on it. So why do you think that is? All hail Carnosaur, am I right?
I don't know, but maybe just because they're expensive to do. maybe people are getting tired. I mean, I never thought I would get tired of seeing a dinosaur. When I was a kid, I'd watch a cheap movie like Lost Continent or Untamed Women or something like that, Unknown Island, and my eyes would just, even if they were lizards and they didn't look like dinosaurs, but to me, they were being called dinosaurs, and that was enough. But and then I saw the first Jurassic Park, and it was like, wow. But now, I watch some of these things on the television, doing something else or paying half attention to it. But you mentioned Carnosaur. That was my first professional on-screen movie credit. I worked on that as a dinosaur consultant, but they didn't do much consulting because pretty much everything had been built by the time I came on board. But it was a Roger Corman movie, and I got my name in the credits, and I got paid every week, so it was good. It was an important step for me. And by the way, Tyrannosaurus there's not one Carnosaur in that movie. Tyrannosaurus was reclassified years before that, but Carnosaur seems kind of cool, and that was the title of the book.
Yeah. Although it has come up a couple times now. Dinosaurs keep coming up. Music keeps coming up. You and I first got in contact with each other because of the reissuing of the Dinosaur Tracks albums that you've done. You did with Pete Bonchali. So I'm sure people who have seen the video or listened to the albums would love to hear some insights about that.
Well, I can tell you how it started. First of all, I was asked to do a cable access talk show. And I asked the producer, can we do it on dinosaurs? That's never been done, a talk show. I'll be up there, I have a pretty young lady who was my assistant, and we'll bring guests on and talk about real paleontology and movies and toys. I mean, the whole gestalt of everything, He's okay. And he showed me one of the shows he'd done, which had some really lame opening music. I said, I don't want to have that music opening my show. I am a musician, and I can write music, and I can play it. And I teamed up with Pete Bonchali, and so we did the song Dinosaur Tracks. And the show went 3 episodes. I don't know if anybody ever watched it. But, and then the producer, Kevin Glover, said, hey, I really like that song you did. If you can come up with 5 more songs, or if you can come up with some more of those songs, I can shoot music videos on them. I said, that'd be great. And so I got together with Pete Bonchali again, who did the first Dinosaur Tracks with me. And before you knew it, we kept coming up with one song after another. And before you know it, we had an album. So the first 6 were to be on the first video. And the director, I wrote the scripts, and then Pete was going to do the next 6. Pete never did it, and we could never get him motivated to do it. But the first 6, the director was clueless. He didn't know. He had no idea what they were about or what they entailed or what. So he quit. So the producer was going to pull the plug on the whole idea of the videos. I said, look, give me a chance. I'll do it for free. If it doesn't work out, I'll just walk away. But if it does work out, we'll do more. So we shot 5 more stories. We had 5 more videos. So we had this whole package. And then we did a wraparound with Doc Dino, who was like a DJ character who introduced them all. And before you know it, we got all jazzed up, and Kevin got more jazzed. And let's do a second album. And that led to a third album. So we ended up with 36 songs. But I didn't want to do Barney and something like that. There were a lot of kiddie records at the time, And I said, I don't want to do anything like that. I want to do something that an adult can play at a party without getting embarrassed. So Pete was all excited about that. And, but let's make them educational too, so they kids who are listening to the songs will learn something. Each song will have at least one or two hardcore scientific facts, but we'll do it in an entertaining, fun way. And then I got the idea. I said, why don't we do each one because both Pete and I were former rock and rollers, musicians, and we had our own reputation to live up to. We didn't want to be embarrassed either. So let's do each one in the style of a different era and a different artist of rock and roll history. So let's do one that sounds like the Beatles. Let's do one that sounds like Elvis. We did one that was a combination of Dave Brubeck and Bo Diddley. You can imagine that. And we did one sound like the Doors. We did one sound like John Lennon. One like Creedence Clearwater Revival. One like Elvis. And this kept going on and on and on. One like Buddy Holly. One like Hart. And we just had a great time doing it. And you gave a great review. I'm glad you understood what we were trying to do. And I really appreciate it.
I'm glad you do. And, I think you achieved exactly what you set out to do with them. They have become some of my favorite rock albums ever. Like I've so wanted there to be dinosaur themed music and not the Barney variety, not that sort of thing. And, the movie soundtracks are great too, but to have songs like that, and they're like, it's not just generic rock and roll. You throw in the word brontosaurus every once in a while. They really move forward with. I feel like I'm tripping over my words here. I'll have to edit this out. I'm glad we're not live right now. Anyway, I think of stuff like nomenclature blues, where you're working in all these Latin names.
And the funny thing about that song was that was our Delta Blues. That was an imitation of one of the Rolling Stones' early songs. Off the top of my head, I can't think of the title. But some of those names have been reinstated since the song came out. And one of the toughest ones to do was Dinosaurs Rule. That was the combination of Bo Diddley and Dave Brubeck, because it had 3 time changes. It went from 3/4 to 4/4 to 5/4, or whatever the order was. And I went in the studio, and we didn't have a drummer. We had a drum machine. And my engineer said, my machine can't do that. It's impossible. I said, well, sure, you can do it. And I thought about it for a second and said, just give me like 4 minutes of a solid bass drum beat, and then show me where the snare drums come in. And I'll play with my finger by hand. I'll tap in the time changes, and then Pete and I'll do the music. And it worked out beautifully. You would never know. But that one, they told me we couldn't do, and we did it. So there.
Exactly. When people say it can't be done, the proper response is watch me, right?
Oh, push me in a corner and tell me I can't do it. That's when I come up with the best, most creative and cost-saving solutions.
And of course, when you sent those albums, you also included the soundtrack for I Was a Teenage Movie Maker, which was the compilation of your different amateur films. And that was sort of, that wasn't arcade, it was Arcadillo.
That was another thing. When I originally played those movies out in my basement with my friends, we would play records, and a lot of in those 1950s movies with the teenage werewolf and the teenage Frankenstein and all that, we would play like Rumble, by Link Ray, a lot of those Dwayne Eddy songs and things that go along with the movies. Well, I couldn't use those songs on my CD. We'd have to pay a lot of people a lot of big bucks. So I called up a friend of mine. After the Penny Arcade, I was in a band called the Armadillo, which was like an outgrowth of the Penny Arcade. And one of our guitar players was David Price, who'd worked with the Monkey, But anyway, we're still friends. And I called him up. I said, can we do a couple just tracks that I had some background music for those songs done in the 1950s style of instrumentals, Dwayne Eddy and Link Ray and Bill Justice and people like that. He said, okay, and he, in the meantime, had built a recording studio in his home. So we went in there, and I'm kind of writing the song in my mind on the way up in the car. I mean, I really didn't know where it was going to go. And we kind of had lived, and like Dinosaur tracks, I wanted to have different sounds for different movies. We kept coming up with more and more songs until we finally had about 10 of them. I said, let's do 12. Let's make an album out of it. So that's how that came about. And so David, nicknamed Spider, David Spider Price and I, together, I played bass guitar and maybe a little bit of rhythm guitar. He played most of the guitars. And I also played some keyboards. And we did a whole album called I Was a Teenage Movie Maker.
It also sounds good. I think I'll try blasting that at Halloween this year. I think it'll be appropriate. And I feel like since we've kind of shifted into the realm of like horror movies slightly, in preparation for this, I did watch Tales of Frankenstein, and I found that to be so fascinating, the way the Frankenstein concept was just expanded on in all those different ways.
Well, I didn't want to remake Frankenstein. It's been done so many times.
Oh, yeah.
And I could never, I mean, even the worst of them are probably better than I could have done. But I had a book called Tales of Frankenstein. It's part of that 12-book series, which had all these short stories in. And I was originally approached by a low-budget director from out of state who wanted me to write a script for him for free. And I said, I'm not going to write a script for free, but if you let me direct it, I might be in, and based on some of my stories. So we were going to do Tales of Frankenstein, and then he wanted to direct some of them too. So there already it was not starting to sound like the deal I had in mind. And then he showed me a movie he had done, and then as far as I was, the deal was off because it wasn't very good by any stretch of the imagination. But I said, hey, the whole idea is too good of an idea to just let die. So I got pulled together some friends of mine out here in California, and I got my money together, and we made the movie. And one of my songs from I Was a Teenage Movie Maker is in the end credits. So I got a little of my music in there, and I tried to make it look as expensive as I could, and I did that by having a big cast. I have over 50 actors in there, and they're all paid, SAG, Screen Actors Guild rates, and each one takes place in a different time period, in a different country. So I wanted each one of the 4 stories to look different from each other, which would give it a more of an expensive look. And I got some known name actors. We mentioned Dark Shadows before. One of the actors was Jerry Lacey, who played Reverend Trask on Dark Shadows. And great person to work with. I had Len Wein, who the comic book writer, who unfortunately passed away before the movie was done, so we never saw it. I had Ann Robinson from War of the Worlds, Beverly Washburn from Superman and the Mole Man right up through Spider Baby, the remake, and T.J. Storm, a martial arts actor. I mean, I had a lot of people in there whose names were known. Emmy Award-winning makeup artist John Goodwin. I had Haywan An, who was the world's leading body painter. Tony Malinowski, he always gets mad when I don't mention his name. The leading editor, who not only edited the film but played the crawling hand. So he said he had a hand in the acting in the movie. Anyway, so it was a great experience for me because it was a fun movie. I didn't want to make a really gory slasher movie or something like that. I didn't want to make a cheap-looking B film that had all the B movie actors that are in all of these things, So, and it won the Rondo Award as best independent movie made that came out in 2018. And 2018 happened to be the 200th anniversary of the publication of Mary Shelley's novel Frankenstein. And one of the days we were shooting was her birthday. So we wished Mary a happy birthday. And I have a lot of really good memories connected with that movie.
Yeah. And like I said, the way that the concept is brought in new directions, like the final concept, the final segment of the doctor is excavating bodies for his experiment, but he's in a place where vampires are still considered a problem. Like,
yeah, most people don't get that. They don't understand when they see a review and they talk about the plot. They don't understand that the scientist in that is putting together a Frankenstein monster using dead vampire parts, except for the brain, which is from a living guy. That's when the monster, the new monster, walks up to the mirror. All you see is the brain floating there, and nobody ever seems to pick up on that or understand it. And I didn't want to call it out. I didn't want to say, "Oh, all you see is the brain." Like, that's a giveaway for low-budget bad movies. I call them "there they go" lines, where a car goes driving away with the good guys in it, the bad guys in it, and somebody on the street goes, "There they go." Well, you know they're going. You don't have to say that. And I figured I'd be a little more subtle and not point that out verbally. But maybe I should have. I don't know. Because very few people seem to understand what that episode is really about. And they told me, that was another time when I got pushed in the corner. Everybody said, "How are you going to do that?" He walks up to the mirror and all he sees is his clothes and the brain floating there. And I said, well, let me just think for a second. And I thought back to some of the old amateur movies I made. How would I have done it back then? And that's the way I did it. We did it with split screen, and the actor walked away, and we shot, we put it all, it was very simple, and it all worked out fine. But again, a lot of people just don't understand what that episode is all about.
That's weird to me because I got it right away. I was picking up on the clues. There's the dirt in the coffin, the garlic on top. Then there's the no reflection, which, you set it up. That guy, that the assistant's always looking in the mirror doing his hair. He goes to the mirror this time, and all you see is the brain. It's like, I was like, oh, he really was digging up vampires.
I learned that from watching old Jack Benny television shows. You set something up early like that. Sometimes maybe 2 or 3 times during the course of the episode, and then you have a payoff at the end. And so thanks, Jack Benny, wherever you are.
And I mean, I would think it would have been even more obvious when it's clear that not only does the brain retain the memories of the assistant who was betrayed, but when he also says, we thirst.
Yes.
Like, right there. It's weird to me that people wouldn't get that.
Well, you have a great taste in dinosaur music, so I'm sure you're a lot smarter than a lot of other people that watch that movie.
I don't know. I just know I thought it was very entertaining. And yeah, like I really need to familiarize myself with your stuff again, like even further. I know I've seen and read plenty of your stuff, because whether it was a huge thing or something that fell through the cracks and is only remembered by those who really were passionate about it, like I said, you've worked on so much. You've done stuff like Space Sentinels, DuckTales, things like that. The Space Sentinels episode, that is it, right? With Anubis. Yeah, I thought that was very interesting in particular, because I've been thinking a lot about the topic of sympathetic villains, and how a lot of stuff these days seems to be going so far in the direction of making the villains sympathetic that they become the heroes and the heroes become the villains. But I think with Anubis, you actually did strike a good way of depicting that.
Oh, thank you. I've written so many of those things. A lot of them I just don't remember anymore.
Well, I do recall, like it's on YouTube, actually, if anyone wants to check it out. but basically, it was Anubis. In this iteration, was an alien trying to experiment with with a new power source. Accidentally blew up his planet. Felt terrible about it. When he came to Earth, he was viewed as a monster and got imprisoned. When he's woken up, obviously he's angry about that and is trying to exact his revenge. But then the heroes are finally able to get through to him and say, there's actually a way we can send you back in time using the energy you've gotten to fix it so you don't make that mistake. And like he did some bad stuff throughout the episode, but it wasn't to the point where he had crossed a line he couldn't come back from, and you feel like, well, he doesn't deserve to be let off that easily. I think that was a good balance struck.
Oh, well, you remember it better than I do. So
I literally just saw it.
yeah.
But yeah, like that was, I think, a really good bit of writing. Again, from a that was one of the Filmation ones. Filmation, I don't think, gets enough credit for a lot of its stuff.
No, and Filmation, I only did 2 animation show scripts for Filmation. One was a Tarzan, and one was what you just mentioned, which was then called The Young Sentinels. That was the title that it was called back then. And they didn't put on the goofy, like the funny dog character along with everybody else, Godzuki and all those things.
Although you did do some Hanna-Barbera too, according to your list of achievements.
Yeah, Marvel,
DC, and again, like every time I think that you couldn't possibly have done everything, there's always another thing. There's even mentioned a script you wrote for a potential Ultraman movie.
Yeah, I was hired. I was paid for it. The people from Subaraya, including the son of E.G. Subaraya, he supervised all the old Godzilla movies and wrote in and all those things, came to the United States, and they hired me to write Ultraman movies to be set in the United States. And I did. I wrote the first draft of the script. They paid me very nicely for it. And they treated me like a king the whole time they were here. Took me to restaurants. And they were going to bring me to Japan, but they never did. And I became very good friends with the line producer, who I worked with on a couple other projects after Ultraman. But the thing was, and that I gotta say, that was one of the most fun projects I ever worked. I mean, you can't imagine sitting there at a typewriter, writing scenes where giant monsters are fighting in Park City or something. And but then they didn't have enough money to make the movie, and that was the end of it. It never happened. But I was really disappointed. That would have been like my first screen credit if it had come out.
Well, Super Eye Productions has been increasing Ultraman's presence recently. There was the animated Ultraman movie on Netflix. They've officially got a channel on YouTube specifically for debuting English versions of their new series. You ever thought of maybe dusting that off, calling them up and say, think we can still make this happen?
The business doesn't work like that. First of all, you got to be about under 32 years old or thereabouts. And you have an agent bring it in. So you got to be usually in your 20s. If you're a minority, that helps these days, If you're not a guy, that helps. You can't just call up and say, like when I started out in animation, that's what I would do. I would call up, I'd like to speak to the story editor of such and such a show. And I would talk to them. And I would say, hey, these are my credits. I can do this, I can do that. And sometimes they would give me a shot at it, not always, because I had the bad habit of finding out about these shows too late when they were already, in production. And but you can't really just do that. There were shows that I was involved in early incarnations, let's say. And I would call up, and I couldn't get anybody even on the phone. when a story editor would come in, they usually come in with their own team of writers, friends of theirs. If you were from the previous story editor from the previous season, forget it. It was almost impossible, if not impossible. So no, that's just unrealistic to even entertain thoughts like that. It's a dog business. It really is. You've got to be really persistent like I was to survive it.
Yeah. Although
I worked on shows where one season you get the highest rated episode of the season, and next season you can't even get anybody on the phone.
Yeah. Although I can imagine that's part of the reason why you eventually started your own production company.
Well, no, I started my own production company because I just got tired of beating my head against the wall trying to raise money. Trying to get somebody to put in like $500 for a movie you're making. And you're beating your head against the wall and, and finally, sometimes it would take me 5 or more years to raise the money to make one low budget movie. And so finally I said, no, I've got this huge comic book collection. I don't care about it anymore. I don't look at it anymore. It's just on shelves. I'm going to sell it and I'm going to finance my own movies, which is what I did. And I'm glad I did it. And I've financed 2 of my own movies now. And I don't have investors that didn't read the contract calling me up in the middle of the night asking me where their money is or showing up at my door, and I have to worry about some Goomba showing up at my doors, with brass knuckles or something. Where's our money? It's a big relief. And I don't have to prove myself to anybody. The movie, if it fails or succeeds, I'm the one responsible. And I'm the only one who has to answer. So that's a great feeling.
I can imagine. Yeah. But yeah, like I said, Tales of Frankenstein, I think the results certainly speak for themselves. And yeah, I do like that idea of being able to do it on your own terms. Trying to do that myself, as you said, it's not easy. See what else we've got in the chat here. What would... I'm just scanning to see... Do either of you ever take some time to just sit down and watch a good nature documentary?
Oh, I watch plenty of nature documentaries that are good. Yes, I have.
Yeah, same here. Like, especially when I was younger, I remember one of my childhood traditions was an ice cream truck would come by every time the PBS nature show was airing. So you run out, you grab an ice cream thing, run back in, see what's going on the Serengeti. It was a good time. What else? Again, just in your opinion, what is the most realistic dinosaur movie?
The most realistic dinosaur movie? In terms of the way they looked or the way they behaved?
I guess in terms of what they get right versus what they did just for the movie.
Probably, even though certain liberties were taken, certain artistic liberties, probably maybe the first. Well, I would say, let me put it this way. Given what was known at the time, scientifically, at the time the movie was made, I would probably say The Lost World, or 1925 Lost World, because that movie showed dinosaurs the way they thought they looked back then, most of which were based on paintings and sculptures by the great Charles R. Knight. Maybe also, maybe the first Jurassic Park.
But quite a contrast there. The silent movie, the Jurassic Park movie, both of which were considered revolutionary at the time.
Oh, yeah. And everything in between, nobody seemed to really care much. Sort of, nobody was going to check. There were no fact checkers back then. Paleontology.
Yeah, unless they were doing the documentaries with the go motion, but you know, I think they're. I guess I'd have to agree because, yeah, the Lost World, they were trying to do that naturalistic thing. Even at the end when the sauropods rampaging through London, it's not because it's a monster; it's because it's confused.
Yeah. If you look at some of those models that Marcel Delgado made for them, for the Lost World, you can see exactly, if you're a fan of Charles R. Knight, you can see exactly what painting that model came from.
Mm-hmm.
And Marcel Delgado did a great job of imitating those paintings, bringing those paintings to life.
Mm. Then of course, Willis O'Brien doing stuff like the bladder inside the body to simulate the breathing.
Yeah.
Doing that one frame at a time and having it look smooth. Like, yeah. I mean, there are so many different versions of that have been released because they keep finding new footage. And it's amazing how much was just left there.
I made a discovery. I announced this on Facebook, but nobody seemed to care or pay attention. Remember Gigantus, the fire monster?
Mm-hmm.
Remember there's a scene in the American version of that movie, Godzilla Raids Again, where they're all sitting around the conference table and the scientist is talking about it. It shows like a film of the Earth when it was young and all this. And there's a shot of two sauropods, stop motion, and they're kind of not exactly fighting yet, but they're like kind of like going at it, you know. And that's been a mystery ever since that movie came out. I think I had discovered it. I was watching the outtake reel from The Lost World, and in it, there's a scene in the lower right-hand corner. There's like a massive scene showing all these animals all moving around. And over in the right-hand corner are two sauropods. One of them has some vegetation in its mouth, and the other one starts going after it. This looked like the next shot, a close-up of those two sauropods continuing the action, which could have been easily cut out because both of them were Warner Brothers. The Lost World was Warner's, and the American release of Godzilla Raids Again was Warner Brothers. And I think they just simply went in there, cut it out, and spliced it in that into that footage. And I think that mystery has finally been solved.
Huh. I'm amazed I missed that too, but here you go. You've all heard it live.
Yeah, and also the animation in the Gigantus scene is kind of jerky. It's not real smooth like Willis O'Brien. O'Brien had an assistant named, I forgot what the first name was, the last name was Roop, R-O-O-P. And his name turns up in that outtake reel a lot. And that was his style of animation. There's a scene in The Lost World where the Allosaurus attacks the duckbill and they go falling into like a little mud hole or something. Same kind of animation. So I think that was a Roop scene that ended up in the outtake reel, and the outtake reel went through it. It was taken out of the outtake reel and put in the Gigantus.
Who would have guessed?
So you guys heard it here first.
There you go, everyone. Oh, wait a minute. Here we go. The work done to ensure the scientific authenticity of the Lost World's dinosaurs is an aspect of that film that's criminally under-discussed today. The adherence to Charles Knight is astonishing. So other people appreciate it too.
Yes.
Let's see. Oh, question specifically for me. How would I feel if Guillermo del Toro made a dinosaur movie? I think del Toro would do it.
His version of King Kong, it would to me be another fantasy movie. I can't see him doing a scientifically accurate dinosaur.
Well, that was Peter Jackson.
Yeah, he had his chance in King Kong and he didn't do it.
Hmm. But Guillermo del Toro's like the Hellboy movies, Pacific Rim. I don't know. He'd probably get the scale right. If he wants to do it accuracy, who knows though?
Well, you could do it, but
Hmm.
would he? Is it, the old?
Yeah. Here's another question. Which of the classic monster archetypes, think Universal, do you feel has been underused?
Underused at Universal. Are you talking about the class from the 30s and the 40s?
Yeah, I think he's talking like your vampires, your werewolves, your Frankenstein monsters. So which of those do we feel has been underused compared to others? Obviously, vampires are everywhere.
I don't know. Maybe the Ape Woman. She had 3 movies, but not. And one of them, she's dead for most of it. I think that could have been, more interesting. They could have made more interesting movies with that character.
Possibly.
Paula Dupree, the Ape Woman. Towards the end of the series, I say maybe the Frankenstein monster. I mean, he started off as like the star of his movies, and he ended up with just kind of a flop. I would have liked to see the Son of Dracula come back. There's a lot of them. The original Karloff mummy. I mean,
yeah, because like they get conflated so much, but Imhotep and Karis are very different.
Yeah.
But and then there was the 1999 mummy that brought back Imhotep, but like made him almost godlike in appearance and power.
Yeah.
Which I like that movie, but something about the original with the more subtle aspect of Karloff's portrayal that gets under your skin.
Yeah. No, Karloff's great in it.
Oh, and just so you know, that footage has been driving me crazy for years, referring to the Gigantus footage. This is the kind of breaking news I live for.
Well, I can totally empathize with you because it's been driving me nuts for years too. And I sort of found it just, I was looking at those outtakes, that outtake reel from The Lost World. It's on some of the DVDs. I think it might even be on YouTube. And it struck me like a bolt of lightning. I said, wait a minute, that's the beginning of the scene that's in Gigantus. And it never struck me before. I thought it was I used to think it was just from some lost, obscure, long forgotten silent movie. But I never thought about the most obvious thing that it could be from The Lost World.
Could be. And that's jogging my memory. You also posted something about some mysterious Frankenstein footage at one point, didn't you?
Well, there's a lot of mysterious Frankenstein footage. It depends. I don't know. I have more details in it.
It was something about like judging by the angles or something. Like certain footage seemed to be missing. Was it? Or it's been a while.
Are you talking about the Ghost of Frankenstein ending?
Possibly.
Where he's walking out of the burning building?
It definitely involved that.
Yeah. I compared that footage with photos in the press book and the actual movie and the still photos and things. And it looks to me like they actually did try to shoot an alternate ending because the monster was going to come back all the time, But I think the Hayes office, the censorship board, where they said the bad guy has to be punished at the end, he can't get away at the end. That's why in the House of Dracula, why the Wolfman doesn't kill anybody, because he ends up with the girl at the end. He's the hero. And I think the censors came in and said, no, you can't do that. And so the footage just ended up in a stock footage library. It ended up on the Steve Allen show, Green Acres and various places.
Let's see. Given both of you have looked into movies often, any unmade films you'd wish got made?
Well, my Ultraman movie, for one.
Of
I wish
course.
that got made. I have a sequel written for my Frankenstein movie, which I'd like. So far, that's still unmade. I'd like to see that get made someday. I know there were a couple movies, but you're hitting me kind of cold here, so I can't think offhand what they were. I wish they had made that. We should go in that direction. But
Let me see.
There's a this title, Dracula versus the Wolfman, or the Wolfman versus Dracula, crops up every once in a while. I'm not sure if that was even a real idea, or if that was a hoax, or if that was just, or whatever. There's a lot of things about that that don't make sense. But if I would like to see that made. I would have liked to see George Méliès make a Frankenstein movie, but he never did, strangely enough.
Yeah, Edison did. Like one of the first things. Yeah. And there's only like a little bit of it that survives today. But
the Edison film is complete. You can see that on YouTube.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I guess the documentary I learned it about was outdated.
Oh, yeah. It's been out for like 20 years at least. And there are, it's on DVD, probably on Blu-ray by now. I don't know how much better they can look on Blu-ray. There's also a 1915 version called Life Without Soul. That's lost. And there was a 1920 version made in Italy called The Mostro di Frankenstein. That's lost, apparently. But you never know. The Edison film was lost, too. I mean, that turned up. You never know what's going to turn up.
Yeah, recently there was a South Korean kaiju movie, Space Monster Wong Magwi, that was thought lost, and it was just re-released.
Hey, by the way, we were talking about Gigantus the Firemancer.
Yeah?
Nope, you see my shirt yet.
Right, yes. Got to show off the shirt you're wearing for this. Ladies and gentlemen, an Anguirus shirt.
Yes, a lot of people have Godzilla shirts, but how many people have Anguirus? I also have a Baragon shirt. What do you think of that?
Baragon's surprisingly popular in Japan, so yeah.
No Gorosaurus shirt yet?
Yeah, so it's weird. You'd think there would be. I mean, Gorosaurus did get a figure released recently, so did Varan. You'd think there might be more interest in them, but I don't know.
Yeah, Anguirus, is it real popular in Japan? Or Baragon?
Baragon, like when they made GMK in 2001, originally was supposed to have Varan and Anguirus and Baragon, but Toho said, no, gotta do King Ghidorah and Mothra. They're the popular ones, but you can keep Baragon. Baragon's marketable. I guess because he looks like a giant puppy. But
yeah, I don't know why. It's hard to figure out why some are popular when some aren't.
I don't know. Although this last G-Fest, the woman who played Baragon in GMK was one of the guests. She's like really tiny, which is why they cast her opposite the guy playing Godzilla, because Baragon's supposed to be so much smaller in that one. But I mean, some of the monsters got revived in a recent series, but a lot of them got redone in ways that were just so weird. Like that series is a whole other topic, though. But
in Final Wars, Anguirus like curls up in a ball and goes back to the city.
Yeah, that was something the fans always thought he could do, and they finally found a way to do it. And then what else? They had Kumunga forming nets with his webs, and Kamacuras
flying and scooting along on its tail, with the feet out front.
Yeah, they don't make Godzilla movies like that anymore. Godzilla X Kong came close, but because it had the zero gravity fight. But then to contrast, there was Godzilla -1, which was really serious.
I haven't seen that yet.
Oh, really?
I have the Blu-ray on order, pre-order. But I'm probably the only person in the world that hasn't seen it. What's amazing about that is how many friends of mine who are not only not Godzilla fans, but not monster fans, think that's one of the greatest movies they've ever seen. They're just raving about it. So it must really be good.
Oh, yeah. Like, I mean, I guess you could say it's the closest we've gotten to the original Japanese cut of the original movie. But very, very different in how it handles its themes, but it's the way it balances everything out, telling that human story is set in a post-war environment and incorporating Godzilla into that. The writer-director Takashi Yamazaki, he knocked it out of the park with that one. You're in for a treat when you see it.
Well, I thought that the rule was you could do any kind of Godzilla movie you wanted now, but you could never tamper with the first one, the 1954 one.
Yeah.
But this tampers if it's take place post-war, it does tamper with the 1954 one, because in 1954, nobody's ever heard of Godzilla before.
Well, whether it's connected or not, I don't think it's supposed to be directly, but for some reason they okayed it.
Have you seen the black and white version?
The black minus color? Not yet.
Hmm.
Although I do remember hearing he originally wanted to keep Godzilla's spines blue when he shoots his atomic breath, despite it, while everything else is black and white, but they decided, nah, just go full monochrome. I hear people saying that makes it better. I don't know, because I'm feeling like maybe this is just me. I've always been confused by the idea of making it black and white automatically makes it better, because I'm thinking it's the same movie. If it's good or bad, doesn't matter if there's color or not. But I don't know. There is certainly merit to when it's black and white.
I heard it wasn't just black and white. I heard they went and they did like a restoration on every single frame by frame by frame. So I don't know. We'll see it eventually.
At some point, yeah. Yeah, it's not like they just turned the color off, from what I heard. But we will see, though. Was the rule no Godzilla movie? Kind of branching off of what you said. I don't know. I don't. People have been posting all kinds of rules that Toho has about what you can and can't do with Godzilla. I haven't heard that one. I do know that, like, for the longest time, they basically said
that was something I assumed. When you couldn't tamper with the first one,
because
that was sort of tampering with the first one by setting one earlier. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I know that for the most part, they've usually said 54 was when it started, and then however whatever takes place next. But I don't know. I've never heard that one specifically. I know there are the rules like Godzilla can't be that you can't just kill Godzilla and have there be none left. There's always got to be a presence of him somewhere, and you can't show Godzilla hunting and eating people. But I don't know, that there was another list of rules that was put out that people jumped onto and saying that's ridiculous, but more time passed and people started to think, is this real? I don't know if it is. I know briefly they had the rule that they didn't want Godzilla to express emotion. Although, I mean, again, watch any of the movies. Godzilla's very emotive. But I don't know. Oh. What tips would you give children to improve their writing skills?
Read a lot. Read all kinds of stuff. And when I was a kid, I read about comic books. But then as I got older, I really got into Edgar Rice Burroughs and a lot of Edgar Rice Burroughs. I read a lot of Edgar Allan Poe. So in other words, read a lot. See what other writers have done and how they handle certain
Mm.
problems and things, and they should write a lot. You know, in the old days, we used to write letters and mail them, put them in an envelope and a stamp, mail them, and get a lot of letters from friends and things. So they should get as much experience writing things, even if it's only a shopping list or something. But those are the two things. You got to get them away from the phones, tapping away at the phones all day. You know, they got to. Then they become zombies. But you got to actually get them to write things. Maybe even offer them a reward, have a writing contest. Who writes the best stories or something? But that's a good question, and I wish there was a real solid one sentence answer to that. And make sure they. This is one of the things that really bugs me about Facebook. I would say at least half the people that post things on Facebook seem like they have about a third grade knowledge of spelling and English grammar. Let them learn grammar and how to spell words and use the correct words and not just everything abbreviated. I mean, you is spelled Y-O-U. It's also spelled E-W-E and probably a couple other ways. But it's not just a letter U, you know, and thanks. It's T-H-A-N-K-S. It's just not T-H-N-K-S or whatever. And so encourage, you know, they should learn that when they get older, they are judged by the way they present themselves to people. Not only the way they speak, but the way they look, the way they dress and everything. You make people make first impressions on people. They might not be right, but it's true. That's what happens. Think of people you know now that are in the 30s and 40s, and the first time when their name is said, the first image that pops into your mind is when you met them, when they were like 10 years old or something, you know, or at least for 2 or 3 seconds. And they have to learn that. But a lot of kids don't bother anymore. It's just, it's all on their phone. Everything's on their phone.
I have seen signs that there's starting to be more of a push in some areas back in that direction. It might be slow, but I hold out hope. Let me see. I saw some other, and something I'd like to branch off of with your advice. Reading a lot is definitely important. You want to, I would say specifically, read the kind of stuff you would want to write, but also read some stuff that might not be your normal taste, because you never know. You might find some good inspiration there.
Yeah, read a good book on paleontology.
Yeah. I hear you've written a few.
Oh, I've written a lot of them, yeah.
Okay, so let's see. There's some other questions here. Branching off of that, writing dinosaur fiction specifically.
Well, my advice, what I said to the last person that called in, you know, you don't want to write something somebody else has already written. So read a lot of the old stuff and read a lot of fiction in general. And I don't mean just genre stuff, science fiction, or read some Ernest Hemingway and William Faulkner, and
yeah,
you know, and get an idea what literature is, and write a lot of it. You know, write as much as you can.
Exactly.
And finish it. You know, a lot of people, they start something but they can't finish it, and or they get sidetracked. They do something else, and then when you finish it, if you don't have an agent, I mean, in the old days it was a lot easier. You just wrote a manuscript and you put it in an envelope with a self-addressed stamped return envelope and dropped it in the mailbox, and the editor responded to you. I don't think you can do that anymore. I think it's all through agents and things. But make sure somebody who is going to buy it. I don't mean self-publishing. I mean, that's okay for some people. I never did it. To me, what legitimizes your work is when a real publisher accepts it and pays you for So send it out. And, there's all kinds of tricks as to when to send it and when not to send it. And, if it comes back and you reject it, don't take it personally. There's a lot of reasons too why something is rejected. It has nothing to do with your worth as a writer or the manuscript worth as a book, and you got to keep sending it out. And sooner or later, like throwing enough darts at the dartboard, one of them might hit the bullseye.
Yep. This one could be interesting.
Yeah, I would just, maybe focus on dinosaur literature. I would take just the word literature in general and see what's before and see how the great writers have written things.
Yeah. So here's an interesting question. I heard a novelist/podcaster say books appeal more to women and movies appeal more to men. What do you think of that claim?
I think it's a lot of poppycock. I think it's the same for both, really. Maybe the stupid men, or smart women. I don't know. I know a lot of men that read. I know a lot of women that like movies.
Yeah,
maybe different kind of movies. The women like the Marx Brothers, and men like the Three Stooges.
Well, I can actually think of when my mother worked in a school library. She was working at that time where people really either weren't into reading, or if they were reading, it was like the guys thought reading was stupid and the girls were only interested in reading Twilight and stuff. But she recognized a couple of them in particular, a couple of students she was forming a bond with, where she knew they were smart enough to comprehend some better stuff. So she was working in the library, and she would say to some of the girls, "Hey, you ever consider reading some Jane Austen?" and would recommend a particular book. And when they would be skeptical, but when they tried it, they liked it and became readers from that point onward. So
when I was a kid, we all read comic books. The guys read, the superheroes and the science fiction and the mystery stuff and jungle comics, and the girls read Archie, romance comics.
I think it's about finding the right thing for people to read, because they probably have a certain perception, and when you can really get them interested in a book that they'll like, that'll expand their horizons.
Yeah,
that's what I think, and I don't think it matters boy or girl, male or female. I think just find somebody the right kind of book, they will become a reader.
Yeah, I think what kills a lot of kids' potential love for reading, at least when I went to school, were like school English classes, and we were forced to read things that we weren't interested in, like Silas Marner. Great Expectations. I mean, Great Expectations is great reading it now, but I remember when reading Silas Marner was like getting root canal work in school, and we had to read that and do reports on it. And there were no classic comics for that one, and they should encourage kids to read something that they would find interesting. I was always being discouraged when I would write, when we had creative writing classes in high school and grammar school, because I wanted to write about vampires and things, and the teachers knew I liked that sort of thing, so I was never allowed to do it. And they would I would start my, I would get these terrible marks in writing because I was getting graded on the subject matter, not the quality of the writing, And I didn't learn how to write until I got out of school. I did it on my own.
There you go. Yeah, that's that could be a whole rabbit hole unto itself about how the education system affects stuff like this. But yeah, like I would tend to agree. I learned the fundamentals of grammar and stuff in school, but like in terms of actually telling a story, that's something I figured out by reading, by watching movies, by really paying attention to how stories are told.
Well, another thing that helped me, especially when I moved to California,
Hmm.
I started making friends with and hanging out with professional writers, and I got a lot of help, a lot of information, a lot of shortcuts, a lot of other things from these writers, like people like Jim Harmon,
Hmm.
Ron Haydock, and then I got to know people like Robert Bloch, you know, Theodore Sturgeon, George George Clayton Johnson was a great influence on me. He taught me how to write novels. I got on
Yeah.
assignment writing a novel, and I didn't know really how to do it. And I said, "Tell me what's wrong with this." And I had a guy in a car rolling down a window, and I was describing it like his hand reached out for the knob and grasped it and turned it to the right. He said, "No, he rolled down the window. That's what you write." And I learned from him and from reading like Ernest Hemingway that the more words you take out of your story, the more adjectives and adverbs, the more professional and better your story. It's like when you're making B movies, the more, you know, the more a character says that's redundant, the more amateurish your movie looks.
Hmm.
There are certain things that Clint Eastwood could say just by squinting without saying a word, you
Hmm.
know. But those there they go lines and everything are rampant in low budget B movies where people say things that don't, you know, it's like when I was writing comic books and I was working for Russ Manning on Tarzan. And I learned more about writing comic books from Russ than I did from anyone else. And he said he wants his panels to be, quote, dense with information, but that doesn't mean a lot of words.
Hmm.
In the 70s, writing a lot of words, especially in captions, were the trend, the trendy thing. A lot of captions all over the place. And I found one example of a science fiction comic book in I think it was a DC comic. I think it was one of the Gardner Fox stories. And it was a panel, it showed a rocket ship landing on a planet. And the caption at the top was, as the rocket ship lands on the planet, and then there was a dialogue balloon coming out of the rocket ship saying, "We are landing on the planet in our rocket ship." There were three things that told you the same thing. So if you're going to put a caption there, try to have it say something that's different than you see in the artwork and
Hmm.
different than what somebody is saying. And what they're saying, it shouldn't be like, "I'm punching you." You just punched the guy. I've been in enough real fights when I was a teenager that I know you don't say a lot of dialogue. You don't you don't tell your origin story as you're punching the guy out or getting punched out. You're fighting for your life, you know. And the
Yep.
costumes are just slowly, especially the ones in the 70s.
Hmm.
Those were so trendy to put a
Yep.
lot of captions in, a lot of words. I think needless to.
Hmm.
The word "indeed" was used. Oh, indeed. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah.
Yeah. Even Hamlet stops talking when he duels at the end.
Yeah. You can and think of all the interpretations you can get out of Hamlet. You
Hmm.
can set it modern day. You can set it in different countries. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. That's one of the great things about Shakespeare in general.
Yeah.
Oh, let's see. We got any other interesting questions here? Uh, two kind of related. Favorite Godzilla film and favorite Ray Harryhausen film.
Well, my favorite Ray Harryhausen film, that's easy. That's The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms.
Hmm.
I was never, I mean, I like the Sinbad movies. I was never so much a fan of the mythology movies. But The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, I liked the old black and white ones he did in the 50s better than the color ones he did later on. They were more fun, to me, anyway.
Hmm.
Godzilla, there were a lot of them. I really like the first one, of course. Everybody does. I really like Final Wars. A lot of people didn't like that at all. And I really liked a lot of the ones in the 80s, Violante and those things. I wasn't a big fan of Shin Godzilla. A lot of people raved about that one.
Neither was I.
I'm sorry, what?
Neither was I.
I probably will like -1 when I see it, based on what I've heard.
-1 is what Shin Godzilla should have been. That's one of my things I say.
What I like about Shin Godzilla is like when the buildings would topple and all the desk drawers would fall out. I mean, that was kind of interesting. I like the second one. Godzilla Raids Again or Gigantic.
That one's definitely underrated.
Yeah. I saw the first two. I saw about the first maybe half dozen in theaters. I saw the first one when it first came out in 1956 in the U.S. and a double bill with Teenagers from Outer Space, which is no. The second one I saw with Teenagers from Outer Space. The first one I saw with Swamp Women, which was a Roger Corman movie with Beverly Garland and a bunch of people. Yeah. So I got to see the first Godzilla in the theater at the Bug Theater, Bug with 2 G's, Chicago. When I was a
lucky.
Yeah.
I'm not envious at all. Well, I can't be that envious. We've got new Godzilla movies coming out.
Because you're gonna live a lot longer than I am, because you're a lot younger than me. If you were my age, you would have seen it, but then you would have been pushing it a little more.
Just a reply to the earlier thing about books appealing more to women. He was gobsmacked by that claim.
Which claim is that?
The one we were responding to. He appreciates our answer.
The one I just did, you mean about the which favorite Godzilla film?
About the earlier earlier one about books appealing more to women, movies appealing more to men.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He just wanted to let you know he appreciated the answer. Let's see. Do you think that all the legendary Godzilla designs, even the new Empire design, would work in unique dinosaur movies? So he's talking about the recent American ones there.
Well, Godzilla, no matter how you portray him, is not going to look like a real dinosaur. So I don't know. I don't like the little tiny head they gave him. I don't know why they did that.
I think they were. I was just going to say, I think they were kind of going for a Stegosaurus look, because Stegosaurus has a smaller head, but it does look weird at times. Sometimes it doesn't look so weird. It depends on the angle. But
yeah, when I first saw it, the first Godzilla with the little head, I thought maybe they were, like in the old sculptures that they would do on cathedrals, where they would distort. If you looked at it head on, it would be all distorted, but you're looking at it from the way below. You're looking up and you get a perspective effect on it. And I thought maybe they were going for something like that. But no, I don't think so. I think it was just somebody's idea of thinking it would look cool. Hey, let's do this. And those little tiny arms they gave them in Shin Godzilla.
Yeah, those were ridiculous.
Like they were going to break off at any moment.
Yeah, Godzilla's head has always been smaller than you would expect from like a bipedal dinosaur. Like you put them side by side, a more realistic dinosaur like Gorosaurus. Godzilla's head is small. Gorosaurus has the huge predatory dinosaur. But you were going to say something, or
I was going to say I realized long ago that it wasn't profitable in my mind to think of any paleontological realism in the Godzilla movie. Just accepting them for what they
were. Yeah, one of the recent animated series they tried to do with Godzilla, they did try to do like having Godzilla evolve kind of like in Shin, but not exactly, where and they tried to incorporate stuff that would have been realistic for like a process of going from an aquatic creature to a terrestrial creature. I'm not sure all of it really made sense though. So it's not that they haven't tried to add that sort of stuff to Godzilla, but Godzilla's a dinosaur only in the sense that he was one once, but in reality, he's something much different. But we have been going for quite a while, and I'm trying to think, is there anything else? Well, I think it is worth noting, letting people know that you're still quite busy with doing things. You volunteer at the paleontology thing, but you're doing plenty of other stuff too.
Yeah, people a lot younger than me are retired already, or just gave up. I look at some of the Facebook posts, from people that were my contemporaries 20, 30, 40 years ago. And that's all they talk about are things they did back then. I don't really care what people think about me, but one thing I don't want them to think about me is that I'm a has-been. That everything I did was, in the 70s or in the 80s, or whatever. I'm busier now than I've ever been. I'm still writing. And it's funny because I sort of come full circle. I started my comic book career, writing for Warren, the creepy, eerie Vampirella. Writing those anthology black and white horror stories. Now I'm doing the same thing for Shudder magazine and Vampirus Carmilla, and I'm the associate editor. And I've written enough stories for them that they've got backlog. I could die tonight, and they could be printing my stories for the next 10 years without running out.
Well, don't do that.
Yeah, and if I had the money right now, I'd be making another movie. And a lot of my old movies, a lot of my old books are coming back into print or back into release. I love with a lot of new features and a lot of, sort of like not just reprints or not reissues. There's new things to make them attractive to a new audience. And I'm very active. I'm busy all the time. And one day of the week, I'm at the museum working on dinosaur bones, other fossils, and so that's a thrill. But I would really like to be doing more music these days, because out of all the things I've ever done, I get the most joy and pleasant memories and personal creative satisfaction from the music. And I wish I was doing more of that. And once in a while, I get the old guitar on or get to a piano or something. That's why those dinosaur tracks were so much fun, because not only, I also played horns on some of those songs. I rented a clarinet. I rented a saxophone. No, I had my own clarinet. I rented a saxophone. I rented a trombone, and I played. I was doing a James Bond type of song, and I wanted a big brass band sound. So I got a trombone, and I harmonized it. I did a couple tracks with the trombone, and that was a great trip down memory lane and a great experience doing music. And occasionally I play now too. I was a teenage movie maker. Music was not that long ago, and I have a friend, Scott Frazina, who played the Frankenstein monster in my Tales of Frankenstein movie. But he's an old rocker himself, and we get together now and then. And he had a birthday party, and he said, "Why don't you bring down your old SG? I have a 1962 vintage candy apple red SG Gibson electric guitar. It's worth about $20,000 now. I paid $100 for it back when it was new." And I said, "No, I don't think it's been a while since I played it." He said, "No, come on down. I'm having a birthday party in a recording studio, and we will a bunch of musicians, and we'll do a little jamming." So I said, "Oh, we'll do some of the old songs, maybe from the 50s or 60s." So we never rehearsed. I was just home with my computer, texting or sending him messages. One of the songs we were going to do was Peggy Sue by Buddy Holly. And Peggy Sue, like most of Buddy Holly's songs, were in the key of A. So I told him, I said, listen to the record, it's in A, and we'll just jam it together. So I went down to the birthday party, and I brought this guitar down, and all these young guitar players were looking at it in its vintage case. Is that a reissue? Can I touch it? And they were in awe of this guitar. So I put the guitar on, I got up there. I hadn't been in front of a microphone in an awful long time. I said, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. And William Moloch, who was the drummer, who was also a horror fan, and he came up and he said, I learned how to play the drums on Peggy Sue. I can play that tom-tom riff exactly like the record. I said, oh, that's great. So we said, okay. So Scott started playing the A chord, and the drum started coming with the boom, 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 with the tom-toms. And I started playing the chords on the rhythm on the A, and I did Peggy Sue. We did it exactly like the record. And it was being up in front of that microphone, behind that microphone, with a live audience out there, and everybody enjoying it was great. And then we did this the last time by the Rolling Stones. And when I used to do that in a different band I was in called the Wicks, I used to sing the lead. So I thought I would just do the lead again. And I never sang the high part. And we got up to it. I did the first half of the first verse, and I forgot the lyrics. Totally forgot the lyrics. So Scott came in with the lyrics. And then we went to the chorus, and we goes, this will be the last time. And I did, for the first time in my life, the high part, the Keith Richards part, hitting it right on the button. And that was another great experience. And I really miss that. I really love performing in front of a group of people live in some old rock and roll songs.
Sounds like it's just great. Sounds like the sort of thing nothing can really beat.
It was like no time had gone by.
Yeah. And of course it helps that you can play by ear, so
yeah, well, I was lucky because my father, who I didn't know because he died before I was had my first birthday, but my father and his two brothers, but none of their kids and nobody else in the family had that ability to play by ear. We could play any song by ear that you could communicate the melody to, and figure out if you gave me an instrument that I'd never seen before, or one of them, we could figure out how to play it probably in about an hour. And their children, my mom, their wives, all could play songs by notes if they took lessons from it. But none of them could just pick up a thing and start playing it. And I never thought there was anything special about it, because I had two friends in Chicago when I was a teenager who would do the same thing. We could just pick up guitars and things and start playing songs together that we'd never played before. And when I came out to California, when I got into the music business, I found out that it was not the case. A friend of mine was trying to figure out how to play the chords, what the chords were, the Proud Mary. I'd never played Proud Mary before in my life. And he said, "What? How?" And he's trying to figure it out. I said, "Wait a minute." And I started thinking of the song in my head, and I started going like this. Okay, the first chord is okay, and the second chord is this, And he said, "Wait a minute, what are you doing? What is this thing you're doing with your hand?" And I felt like Bernie Sanders when he talks and gives a speech, And I said, I don't know. I never thought I didn't realize I was doing that. And I realized what I was doing. I was picturing in my mind a keyboard. And where you can see all the keys, you can see the chords. And I was figuring out how to play it on a piano and telling him how to play it on the guitar. And that, to me, then a little light went off. Hey, that wasn't, not everybody can do that. And I was lucky that I could, and that my dad and his two brothers could do that. I just inherited that. And so that was easy for me. My music has always been easy. A lot of the creative things, acting, writing, artwork, have all been easy for me, which in school was a plus for me, because I could get good grades as long as I wasn't writing about vampires or something. I could get good grades.
Yep. You should have written it where it's the vampires turning into a Frankenstein, because then they wouldn't have understood it.
Yeah, I remember we were supposed to write a poem in one of my English classes, and we had to read the poem in class. This was in sophomore year of high school. And I wrote a poem, and it went like this. And I said, of all the creatures of darkness there are, the vampire is the most famous by far. He wears a silk cape and a long top, or he wears a long cape and a tall silk hat, and has two sharp teeth like those of a bat. And the nun just immediately shut me down. And I thought it was a pretty good poem. It had rhyme. It had the idamic pentameter, whatever it was called, rhythm. And but they never got to hear the whole song, the whole poem.
Oh well. Let's see. I'm looking through. I think let's try one more question here. You mentioned if someone wants to tell a story, they should tell their own instead of someone else's. What are your thoughts on remakes in general? Also, thanks for such assuring words about never having to be a has-been and always doing more, as I think very much of a lot of people fret over what they didn't do a while back, me included.
Well, me too. I have a lot of regrets about things I didn't do or could have done better, things that I turned down, and I shouldn't have. But story, I've always been, I didn't realize this until recently, but if you take all the things I've done, whether it's writing comics or novels, or poetry, one poem, that was a Frankenstein poem, which did get published, songs, all of making movies, all of them in some way tell a story somehow. Mm-hmm. So I'm a storyteller, basically. That's what I basically do. And as far as telling your own stories, even if I'm doing something that's a cliche theme, like a vampire show, I always try to put a new twist on it. Like when I did some, so one of my companies I did several vampire movies. Well, how about a vampire movie where a vampire is trying to find a way to not be a vampire movie? Or a vampire movie where they're trying to find a way to come out during the daylight? Or I did a story in Shudder recently. What if there's a story about a werewolf, which I don't want to get too political here, but a werewolf that identifies as being a vampire? What would that happen? I call it transformation, with a hyphen. And I wrote it. It came out. So I like to put a different spin on things. You think you're going down one road and you go down some other. Even my Frankenstein movie that you said you like, there are things in it that are a little bit different. The scientist who makes a monster out of vampire parts, except for the human brain. A movie about a crawling hand, where we emphasize. See, before Victor Frankenstein went to medical school, he was into alchemy. Let's take that part of the original story that Mary Shelley never went with, and make a story out of it. So I always try to do something a little bit different, and not just make it the same old cliche.
So whatever you're doing, whether it's original or some continuing a legacy from someone else, always try to put your own spin on it.
Yeah. Whenever you're in doubt, here's what I do. Whenever I was in doubt, or whenever I needed a story and I couldn't come up with an idea, I always went back to the classic Man in the Iron Mask. I rewrote that story about 6 or 7 times in cartoons, and my Tarzan filmation cartoon was called The Beast in the Iron Mask. I did it in the Gold Key story, The Creature in the Iron Mask. I did it, a Shutter story, The Monster, the Creep in the Iron Mask. It was, I've done that, a variation on that story so many times already, and I probably haven't finished yet.
I don't doubt it.
But you get a classic, and you put a twist on a classic, Romeo and Juliet or something, you got a new story.
I think that's pretty good advice to end things on. So, because we've been going for quite a while, and we've covered so much ground, of course. And
yeah, we've been over 2 hours.
Yeah. So, before we wrap things up, any other parting words you want to say? Anything you want to promote?
Well, look at my website. It's just my name, donaldfglut.com.
I think it's linked in the description.
Yeah. And then I've got 4 other websites that are all, I think, listed on there somewhere. I love what I do. I hope all of you can find something to do in your life that you love to do and yet can make some money off of it. I'll tell you, writing and all this, it sure beats honest work, or a 9-to-5 job. It's a difference in having, with most people's jobs, they work all week. They don't like they don't particularly enjoy what they're doing, and they can't wait till the weekend comes up where they can relax and do whatever they do. And they can't wait till the job ends. With me, I can't wait till it starts. And then, as we said before, it's sometimes kind of sad when it ends because you had so much fun when you were doing it. And I was lucky, but one thing I never did that so many of my friends have done is they give up. Things aren't going their way for a while. Things can you have to learn how to tighten the belt. You got to learn how to get through some bad times. And I've gotten through some really unbelievably bad times, but I've always fought it out. And one thing I got from my mother, she could get through anything, and I inherited that attitude. And I've always stuck it out, and sooner or later, the pendulum swings back the other way. But a lot of people don't give it that. They throw in the towel, or they say they're too old, or whatever. And as long as you got a mind that you can still do these things, And I'm always figuring out new ways of making money and new ways. It's amazing if you put your mind to it, what you can think, you can think of doing.
I also recall seeing in another interview a little interesting metaphor you would impart involving the classic monster, the mummy. If you'd like to share that with everyone.
Okay. I've got people ask, what are your philosophies of life? I have 3 philosophies of life. One is a man's got to know his limitation. Now, I stole that from Dirty Harry. Second, if you can't deduct it, don't spend it. See how much you can buy that you can take off your income tax. That'll help you out financially. And they'll also buy you a lot of things that you really like to have that you can figure out ways to take it. But the third, and you can apply this to so many things, including things like addiction. Here it comes, and I stole this from, Bill Cosby, years ago. If you can't outrun the mummy, you deserve to get killed. Mummy's always chasing after some guy who's running at 78 RPM speed, and the mummy's chasing him at 33 1/3 speed. The guy always trips or runs into a cul-de-sac or something, and the mummy always gets him. That guy deserves to get. He should have outrun the mummy. So those are my 3 philosophies of life.
Good philosophies to live by.
Pardon me?
Very good philosophies.
Oh.
Well, once again, thank you very much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me on and taking up all this time.
Well, it was time well spent, I feel, and I'm sure we're all looking forward to seeing whatever it is you manage to do next. And
so am I.
Yeah. And of course, revisiting what you've already done. And thank you very much for not only being on the show, but also for the impact you've left and the inspiration that you've given so many of us.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. And again, thanks again for the nice review you gave our music.
You're quite welcome.
Much appreciated.
So, and of course, thank you to everyone who joined us. If I didn't get to your question in the chat, I'm sorry. There was just quite a bit to go through, but don't take it personally. It was just because there was a lot. So, with all of those thank yous out of the way, any particular way that you'd like to sign off? Or
well, as Cisco continues to say, goodbye, amigos. See you soon. Ha!
Very well said. And until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off.